Jai Prabhuji. Hello and welcome to our course where we are discussing the book of Prabhuji, Kundalini Yoga, The Power is in You. This is our final class of this course, and I thought that the best way to end this course is by reading together and exploring the epilogue of the path of the Kundalini. It's the last part, the last thing that we're going to find in the book before the glossary and the Sanskrit terms guide, but it's after the sādhanā, the section of the sādhanā of the book. We have here what I think it's a condensation or a concentration more than condensation. Yeah, that would be a more appropriate term of all the things that we've been learning and sharing in this journey throughout the course. This is also why at the beginning of the course, for the ones that are with us from the beginning in the introduction, I actually took a part of this epilogue in order to share what the course was going to be about. There we have an explanation of what is the meaning of terms that we've been using throughout the course. So I thought at the beginning it was very appropriate and helpful to begin by sharing in regards to these terms, and we've been using them, and today we are we are gathering all these things that we are mentioning. And I avoided to use the word concluding because not long ago Prabhuji was speaking about it, and how conclusion is ending, finishing something, but this finish or end that he shared about was the one that it's in the cemetery, like if there is nothing that can come out from it. And when we are when we are in front of this opportunity that the course of the book is finishing, it's representing more a beginning of another course, of new adventures where we can explore other things. And I hope that this will open the curiosity that it's something that we shared in many occasions to continue from here, but not that it will finish and be put on a side, but that it will open the opportunity to learn and to explore other things. So, epilogue. The path of Kundalini. This path lies in the foundation of every type of yoga. Every feeling of love and devotion that we experience is Kundalini herself yearning to be reunited with her Lord. And for me, it was very interesting how Prabhuji is starting this part of the book by saying that it lies in the fundaments of every yoga, the Kundalini. Even though in the Kundalini we have a specific path in order to awaken and induce the elevation of the Kundalini, this is not a monopoly of the Kundalini. It lies in the fundaments of every yoga, every path that pursue self-realization, the recognition of what we really are, the fusion that happens with Shakti and Shiva in the seventh center, it's going to occur too. This phenomenon is going to occur when the realization of what we really are happens, even though we can be following other paths, not specifically the path of the Kundalini Yoga. Then he says, one who approaches this path to attain power, strength, or energy will be disappointed, but not one who takes this path to grow, evolve, and develop. And it's setting the right attitude in which we need to undertake this path. As we also saw when we spoke in our previous class in regards to the sādhanā of this path, this is not for a hobby or a pastime, but to undertake it seriously as a way of living. And at the same time, if we get closer to this path in order to get energy to attain something physical, which can happen many times, or even to get mystical experiences, then we are going to be disappointed, but not who is doing it in order to grow, to develop, to mature, which is something that we saw throughout this course in regards to the elevation of the Kundalini and what happens every time the Kundalini perforates another center. The message of Kundalini Yoga speaks of the need to spread our wings and fly from this earth, or rather to distance ourselves from the worldly. This yogic path gives us the means to escape the control of the gravitational field of our attachments. When I'm reading this part of spread our wings and fly from this earth, it reminds me a part of the preface of the book where Prabhuji is also speaking about flying, and I would like to share it with you. And it says, I advise you to fly freely and never be afraid of making mistakes. Learn the art of transforming your mistakes into lessons. Never blame others for your faults. Remember that taking complete responsibility for your life is a sign of maturity. When you fly, you learn that what matters is not touching the sky, but the courage to spread your wings. The higher you rise, the smaller and less significant the world looks. As you walk, sooner or later, you will understand that every search begins and ends with you, and ends in you. So here we see how in both writings, it's using this analogy of flying and spreading our wings. And I really love this part in the preface where it says that what matters is not reaching the sky, but to have the courage to actually fly. And this is what the Kundalini Yoga is about, to elevate ourselves. And later, we're going to see also something that is mentioned in the preface, how the more we elevate ourselves, then our life as human beings becomes insignificant. When you see your life from certain height, then it's not as relevant as when you see it from the same height. Many human beings waste the greatest blessing and pass their days on the planet surviving, merely interested in satisfying their basic physical needs to make a living. It is a great tragedy to survive when you have the marvelous opportunity to live. This is something that Prabhuji frequently speaks with us personally, how many of us spend our lives surviving instead of living. And as he said there, we receive this greatest blessing. It's the greatest blessing to be born as a human being, to have this logic, this rationality, the power of consciousness, and to waste it only interested in satisfying very basic needs, things that are right in the first center, in the Muladhara, surviving, accumulating things, trying to fulfill different basic needs. But this is only surviving, and we do have the opportunity to live. When we realize what we really are, we start living. We refer to the spiritual process as an elevation, as if it were a physical direction, because In seeing ourselves from the heights, our life within society, with its worries, goals, and interests, seems so small. What we just read too in the preface. So we see there a taste of Kundalini in the preface, or we see here in the epilogue a taste of the preface, but we see the connection between both of them and this analogy of flying and what happens when we elevate ourselves, when we grow and develop, how different things become smaller. As we overcome weaknesses and transcend addictions, pleasures offered by this world decrease and mundane enjoyment diminishes. When observing the worldly from the heights of the spirit, our consciousness grows, expands, and flourishes, even though our bodies remain in the same place. It is an experience in which nothing changes physically, but nothing will remain the same. So I would like to comment two things that we find in this paragraph. The first one is the last thing that we just read, where the distance that we are referring to, and it's something that we share throughout the course, it's not a physical distance. What we're speaking about, more like an interior elevation, and in the next paragraph we're going to understand more what we mean when we said interior or internalizing. And it's saying how the change is not physical, but nothing is going to be the same. And something else that I want to refer to was the fact of when we are elevating ourselves and we are in the heights of the spirits, how the worldly things become so small and they don't matter as they used to. And this reminds me to this very beautiful verse that we find in the Bhagavad Gita. And we share it in the second center. Like from the second center, we are understanding, not even from the second, since the first one, but in the second one, we share in regards to our attachments to this propensity or tendency that we have as human beings to pursue pleasure. And what happens when someone realizes the divine, then these worldly attachments, these worldly needs become insignificant. And I would like us to read again this very beautiful verse. It says, Vishaya vinivartante naraharasya dehina rasya varjam rasopyapsya param drishtua nivartate. And it says, the objects of the senses leave one who abstains from them, but not the desire to enjoy them. However, even this desire is lost in one who has realized the Supreme. Bhagavad Gita, this is the chapter 2, verse 59. So to bring a little bit more of context in regards to this beautiful verse of the Bhagavad Gita, when we share in regards to the second center, we learn in regards to our, as I mentioned, our tendency to pursue pleasure. And what it was telling us is not to repress, reject this desire of pursuing pleasure, but that something happens organically when we have this taste of something superior. And it's telling us there, like someone who abstain from fulfilling the desire continues there, this desire for sensual enjoyment. But even that desire vanishes, disappears when someone realizes the divine. And this is what this path is all about, to allow this fusion of Shiva, of Shakti and Shiva in the seventh center. And the other thing that I see expressed here is that we're seeing different things that we saw in regards to the different centers. Earlier we spoke about the basic needs, and the basic needs are related to the first center. Now we're speaking about the pursuit of pleasure, and the pleasure is we see it expressed in the second center. And even though it's not mentioned here specifically which center is speaking about, it's speaking about them. And now that we are sharing together, we can explore more and with depth what it actually means, the things that we find here. Then it says, in terms of consciousness, to ascend is to pursue fusion, while to descend leads us to multiplicity. Upward is synonymous with interiorization, while downward is exteriorization. As we go within, we elevate. As we go outward, we descend into the relative world of names and forms, and our perception of life becomes superficial. To really grow is to know ourselves. The better we know ourselves, the greater the heights we will reach. So here there is something very interesting, like this example that we use about the thermometer, that it's expressing the elevation of the Kundalini. So here is telling us the better we know ourselves, then the better it's our elevation. So we can reach higher the better we recognize and understand, and not understand, the better we know ourselves. I know what I am. There is an expansion of consciousness and awareness in each of these centers. Every time the Kundalini ascends another center and absorbs the properties of each center, then there is a growing, there is a maturity process happening there, and there is better knowledge of what we really are. So then our height, it's even higher. In this transformative return from earth to heaven, in this flourishing from what we have to what we are, it is very difficult to precisely mark where each stage begins and ends. The awakening of each center does not depend only in the method that we practice, but on the price we are willing to pay. Techniques are intended to create enough space within for something to occur, but God happens according to His own will, which is absolutely free. Techniques are not meant to manipulate heaven, since it cannot be controlled by humans. Rather, techniques are an invitation that does not obligate the guest to come. This is like a continuation of our previous class of the sādhanā of the path, where we saw that they are not in order to manipulate the divine, because the divine cannot be manipulated, but they are rather, as it says here, an invitation, and the guest is the one that decides if to come or not. We saw the attitude of the sādhanā, which is to prepare the conditions for something of the divine to happen, and of course we want to be ready if the divine accepts the invitation. So here it's one more time showing us what are the techniques for. Just like seeds buried in the soil, we remain in the basic chakras. This type of yoga suggests we elevate ourselves, mature, grow, and blossom in and from consciousness. The distance between one chakra and the next will depend upon our thirst for freedom, our hunger for bliss, and our desire to love. We will move from the first center to the third only when we understand the true value of material objects and realize that to be is more important than to have. Again, here we see something that happens in the first center, and it's sharing here in regards to the basic ones. Remember that we have the inferior ones, we have the superior ones, and we have this bridge, which is the anahata. So when we are still very focused in what we possess, we continue to be in the first center, in the first few centers. But when we understand and value that what's important more than what we have is what we are, then this process of growing and maturity can occur. The distance to reach and awaken the heart center is proportional to the time we delay in accepting our solitude. From Anya to Sahasrara, there is only one step from what we believe ourselves to be to our reality. So it's showing us there what needs to happen in order that we will cross these centers. And I don't think it's by chance that it's mentioned the different centers where we have the grantees, these different knots that are not allowing that the Kundalini will ascend if we're not ready, if we're not mature enough for it. So there are certain attachments that we need to renounce, to transcend, in order that this grantis will open, and it was shown here. From possessions to being, that it's more important in the Anahata to accept our solitude. We learned when we saw this class about the grantis how the attachments here are more subtle and more difficult to transcend, because it's not something tangible, it's not something material that it's easier to give up. But we're speaking more about our attachments to different people. And when we accept our solitude, these attachments are transcended. And the last thing was from the Anya to the Sahasrara is this wrong belief of what we are. So from what we believe ourselves to be to what we really are. Once we realize this, then the elevation from the Anya to the Sahasrara occurs. Kundalini Yoga trusts in the human being. It teaches us that our divine potential will not be found in anything external because it lies within, and we only need to awaken it. Just as noise and commotion awaken the mind, silence and observation disturb the sleep of consciousness. We must fill ourselves with silence and observe attentively in order to awaken it. So this is something that we share frequently throughout this course, how we don't need something external or to add something, get something, reach something. But this divine potential is already in us. The Shakti is here, the Kundalini is here. And Kundalini is telling us we only need to awaken it. But it's already here and we don't need something external. And then when we share in regards to the different practices to open the chakras, we learn how there is a lot of concentration needed in order to open the chakras. After opening the chakras, then we can awaken the Kundalini. But we see here that what will awaken it is the silence and the observation, and not the noise, how it's the ingredient in order to awaken the mind. The mind is attracted by noise, movement, but the consciousness is attracted to silence and observation. Water in its liquid or solid form is attracted by the force of gravity. And this we learned it when we saw our second center. The second center is the element that was associated with was the water, and we saw how then with this specific center was so easy to fall because water is it's influenced by the law of gravity, and then it was very easy to fall and to pursue this pleasure. So here it's telling us that to awaken Kundalini is to ignite the divine To awaken Kundalini is to ignite the divine fire that evaporates water, right? We saw that the fire is located in the Manipura. It is the only way water can go up and reach the heights. In the Kundalini Yoga, we are searching for the elevation. So it's telling us how when we ignite this divine fire, then the water can evaporate and can reach the height and not go down. Our attraction to the light implies an unconditional acceptance of the fire and its heat, right? Because it's very difficult to stand on the heat of the fire. But our thirst for freedom, for realizing what we really are, for bliss, is going to allow that we will stand in the heat and the fire itself. So it needs to be with an unconditional acceptance. It says only people worthy of the grace to accept this heat and their own evaporation will emerge in totality. because this is a grace, it's something that we receive. The power to stand in the heat and allow the evaporation to occur is a grace. And as it says here, only people that is worthy of this grace can embrace all this process of evaporating what we believe ourselves to be. Kundalini Yoga, this is the last paragraph. Kundalini Yoga is a path that begins when we become aware that we are buried in the earthly. The Master will say that there is nothing wrong with that as long as we do not take the mundane, our hearth and home. So we saw also in one of the paragraphs that we share in regards to the practice or the sādhanā, spiritual practice or sādhanā, we saw how one of the most important steps is to realize that something is happening, that something is wrong, that there is a problem, that there is conditioning. We can put it in many different words, or like it says here, that we are buried in the earthly. So the spiritual master, our guide, says, it's okay. It's okay. Now you understand it at least. Now you recognize it. So now don't make the earthly your home, but our actual home is the divine. So this is why we follow this path, in order to elevate ourselves to the sky. Kundalini Yoga leads us to responsibility, maturity, freedom, and heights. And this last part is, I think, my favorite sentence from the whole book. And it says, it teaches us that we are a seed of light with infinite potential, which, from the depths of the earthly and mundane, is capable of growing, elevating, and transcending until it manifests as the most fascinating lotus of creation, as the most marvelous flower in the garden of the Lord. So in this last sentence, it's expressed what this so in this last sentence is expressed what this path is about, and it shares how Kundalini Yoga trust in the human being. And it says we are seeds of light. We have the potential to grow, elevate, mature, to take a responsibility. And from this small seed, and it's using the lotus flower needs to grow from the mud, from the dirty of the soil in a lake. And it needs to grow from that dirtiness, and then appears in the surface of the water and becomes this marvelous lotus flower. And here it's saying us how we can become a flower in the garden of the Lord, in the garden of the divine. And this is what this path is about. This is everything for today. I think it's appropriate to remind something that I've shared in the past, and how in this institute, as disciples, we are sharing our own understanding of this meeting with an enlightened being, with the words of an enlightened being. Sometimes we speak about the videos, conferences, etc. So what's important for me as a disciple is your understanding of this meeting with the course and the actual words also of Prabhuji, of this enlightened being. And I hope I humbly transmit his what is written here and provide a better understanding also of them. This is everything for this course, and I hope to meet you in the next one. Thank you for joining us today. Jai Prabhuji.